Good evening, everyone. I'm going to just give it a couple more minutes to make sure that everyone is able to get into the meeting.
Is there a button to raise our hand if we want to speak?
Let's see. Anastasia, can you help me with that question?
There is. It's down at the bottom of your Zoom screen.
My interface looks a little bit different than yours, Mr. Curtis. So
yeah, mine just says mute and stop video on the left, and then participants share screen and record in the middle, and then leave on the right. Usually there's a spot to say share or raise hand.
If you open up the participants, there should be a button that says raise hand.
There we go. With a little help from our friends, we can get it.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Oh, there you are.
Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. First, I want to introduce myself. I'm Jennifer Gordon. I'm the Public Works Operations Manager. I've been working at the city here. It will be 13 years in August, this August. So I've been here for a little while. I'm going to go over a little bit of the background of information about the Public Works Shop and how we got to this point. Go over the schedule moving forward, and then give a brief explanation, discussion about like what kind of activities you can expect us to be performing. And then I'm just going to open it up and try to give you all as much time as possible to answer questions or make comments and whatever. So with that, we only have an hour, so I'll try to do this quickly. The city incorporated in 1998, and since incorporation through 2018, we have previously contracted with the city of Lake Forest Park. We did something that we called the Public Works Services Analysis started in 2016 to look at the kind of services we were providing, how we're providing them, and how we could do maybe a better job, increased level of service. Through that process, we discovered that we needed to make some changes in the contract with Lake Forest Park to get a better, product out of that contract. And so we began a process to review that contract and, discuss with the city of Lake Forest Park on what things we could change to make it better. Through that process, Lake Forest Park decided that it was no longer beneficial for them to be providing services to the city of Kenmore. And so they gave us notice in 2018, May of 2018, that they were no longer going to be providing services for the city of Kenmore after January 1st of 2019. So it's at that point where we needed to kind of switch our focus and figure out how we were going to provide those services to Kenmore. And so we decided that we were going to bring those services in-house and hire our own employees to provide those services. So during those months between May and December, we ordered equipment, found a temporary location to operate out of, and start the discussion with council about future plans and what the needs were of the operation. So our temporary location for our current yard is located on the corner of 522 and 67th. So just right next to across the street from Jimmy John's on 522 there. We have about a half-acre site that we use as our yard currently. And then we still owned a post office building that used to be the city hall. And so we had about 1,400 square feet or so in the back of the post office building that we turned into office and break space for our public works crew. So we got that operation started knowing that we would need to find a larger site for the operation, a permanent location for that operation. We had a couple of attempts to purchase property. The first one was located on Northeast 202nd Street, kind of next to the Blueberry Farm. And we looked at that site, did some environmental review and assessments, and we also heard from the community that they, didn't approve of us locating on that property. And so between that and some of the environmental issues that arose during that process, we decided to not move forward with purchasing that property. So we went back to the drawing board, and the council direction at that time was the requirement of the criteria was to find a location that was zoned outright for that use, which really reduced the options for us to downtown commercial. We did find a location that was suitable, and we attempted to acquire that property through eminent domain, and the community came out in opposition of that, and people came to our council meetings and spoke at public comment. And so at the end of the day, we didn't move forward with that location either. At which point we decided that the council decided to create a subcommittee of council members to kind of tweak and develop a new criteria. And so they did that in September of last year. So September of 2020. And so we were in the middle of the budget adoption that fall, winter. And so we picked the criteria up from the council subcommittee in the beginning of this year. And we kind of created a process from that criteria and took that to council for their approval in April. And so we've been going through this process that we're calling a 5-phased approach. I don't want to go into a lot of detail of that. There's lots of information on the website, and I'm happy to answer questions, but I don't want to take too much more time. So during that process, we started evaluating all of the properties in Kenmore as opposed to just properties that were zoned outright for that use. So we started out with 7,000 properties and have been whittling it down through the phased approach. Now, while we were going through this evaluation of the sites in Kenmore, it came to light that there was a property for sale on Northeast 202nd. And so we decided to take a look at that property and enter into a purchase and sale agreement for that property. And then we looked at the neighboring property and found that the owner of the neighboring property was also a willing seller. So we entered into a purchase and sale agreement with that property owner also. And so at that point, that's kind of where we're at right now. We are looking at those properties, their feasibility for housing a public works facility there. At the same time, we are continuing on with our process because as we've learned in the past that nothing's a slam dunk. So we've got to continue on with the process. And if it is determined that those properties aren't going to work out, we will, continue on with the next phase, which is phase 5. I guess I just wanted to give a brief kind of overview of the type of work that we do, because I feel like there's lots of rumors out there and people have some ideas of what it might look like, especially right now when we've got lots of construction going on in the city. We've got the walkways and waterways projects happening. So we've got the sidewalk projects on Juanita and 68th. We've got, the West Sammamish Bridge replacement project. We've got the 2 parks projects going on. And so there's a lot of construction going on, but what I want to tell you is that those projects are very large scale projects, and those are the types of projects that our own crews would not be doing. So I guess just in comparison of scale, you know, those projects are just like completely beyond anything that our crews would be doing. So I know that folks that live on 202nd and Juanita are going through, you know, living through those construction zones and how frustrating it is, and with large equipment and dump trucks and lots of trips and digging and road closures and that kind of thing. And so, what I wanted to explain was that those are not the kind of day-to-day operations that our own crews perform. So the typical work that we do, and the folks that are going to be housed in the Public Works facility are our Public Works operations staff, consisting of our parks maintenance crew and our streets and stormwater maintenance crew, as well as our environmental services division folks that do perform our inspections on surface water facilities. They do our surface water utility locates for projects. And then they also kind of oversee the surface water facility maintenance tasks, which consists of mostly like vegetation management, pond dredging, culverts, kind of anything to do with surface water facility and the maintenance of that facility. As far as the parks maintenance and the streets maintenance side of things go, we still consider ourselves a contract city. And so we do a lot of work with King County does a lot of work for us still, as well as private contractors. So when it comes to parks maintenance, the day-to-day kind of what I call mow and blow type of stuff is done by a private contractor. And our crews do things like opening up the parks. They clean the restrooms every day, you know, trash patrol, special projects like irrigation, and you know, work with the senior center, the picnic shelters, and that kind of thing. The streets folks, their day-to-day operations are kind of divvied up between streets type operation and surface water maintenance tasks. And during the winter months, we primarily focus on debris pickup, leaf debris, street sweeping to keep all that stuff out of our stormwater system. And then, you know, the potholes and that kind of thing. We don't run any large paving operations or anything like that. The type of paving operation that we would do in-house would consist of things like small patches at the end of a day job. So we don't hold or have any kind of equipment that would store hot mix asphalt, for instance. Anything that we pave is done. We go pick it up that day and we use it on site, and then that's it. There's no storage. We only store cold patch mix asphalt at the site. The other types of stuff we do is like sidewalk repair work, vegetation, maintenance in the right of way, fencing, guardrail repair, those kinds of things. But the scale is pretty small. Like I said, if it's kind of going to take our crew multiple days to do it, and it takes our whole crew, then we're contracting out because we just don't have the resources to get that kind of work done. So I'm going to stop there, and I hope I gave you kind of a brief, good idea of what kind of work we do on a day-to-day basis. But at this point in time, I want to turn it back over to you all to ask questions and provide comments. Let's see, I've got Milton Curtis is first, has his hand up first here.
All right, so I'm Milton Curtis. I actually live on 202nd Street. So when addressing big issues like this, I always start with the principles. So one principle I think is the city does need a public works department. Number two is to minimize the impact on citizen neighbors. And number three, if this was easy to do, we would have found a spot already years ago. So it's a challenge in a small city like us to find the right place. So the next thing I usually do is I say, well, what if the city chose this lot? And then the second big area is what if the city didn't choose it, and what would development look like? So under what if the city chose this, the adjacent properties, so to the north is Kenmore Middle School, so it doesn't have any people living there. On the west side is the parking lot. On the south side across the street are about 5 properties, including mine. On the east end are about 3 properties. And so I think of all the spots that this public works shop could be located, I think this is one of the least impactful I can think of. Then I look on the other side. Well, what if the city doesn't use this and it develops according to the R6 zoning that's already in the area? And one development is already in process right now. So it's 1.2 acres and we'll have either 7 or 8 houses on it. So if all 3 lots develop, they don't have water on that side of the street. We've got the stream on our side of the street. So there'd probably be about 16 houses on the 3 lots. They'd be large, probably in the $800 to $1 million range would be my guess, because that's what the market will support. And on average, I would expect 3 trips per day during peak times. So way more traffic than I think this 7 employees for the public works group would look at. And the landscaping would be pretty minimal for development. They usually put in small trees that take a long time to develop. And the city, I think, is committed to doing a nicer job with screening than if this developed into houses. Our street would forever change if that happened. As far as the noise, I really think that the number of people coming and going will produce less noise than the school buses, which come and go twice a day during the school year. And I think the key is going to be screening. I have 2.5 acres and I have some areas with 5 trees. I hid the neighbor on one side, and with 2 sequoias, I can hide a street that's across the way. So like 2 Western red cedars and 5 Portuguese laurel, I can hide a 1.5-story, 10,000 square foot building really easy. So it's a matter of planning ahead. So thank you.
Thank you. Lynn?
Here. Yes, my name is Lynn Longpree. I live at 6643 Northeast 202nd Street. I have 2 issues that I'd like to raise.
Okay.
I wasn't able to join the meeting on July 7th, but I did watch it on YouTube. One of my neighbors made an argument that the additional traffic and noise generated by Public Works wouldn't be an issue because, quote, it's already baked into our neighborhood. We're used to buses coming and going twice a day. I disagree with that. Increasing truck and heavy equipment traffic adds to the congestion and hazards that are associated with it and would negatively impact our residential neighborhood. The other issue I'd like to raise is the issue of safety. Northeast 202nd has been identified by the school district as a walk boundary. The route is used by middle school students to walk and bike to school. The city has identified Northeast 202nd as a critical non-motorized corridor. In fact, the city has made pedestrian and bicycle safety its #1 priority. Locating a commercial enterprise such as a public works facility in a school zone is inconsistent with its safety goals and should concern the school district. So my question is, has the school district been notified? And if they have they responded?
Okay. I won't be able to go into, answer everybody's questions, but I am going to be writing these down and making some notes. But we have approached the school district and they are aware that the city is looking at these properties. Thank you for your comments. Next, I have Debbie Richmond. You're still on mute, Debbie. Still can't hear you. It should be just, there you go. There you go.
Okay, I live almost directly across the street from these two properties. And I find it interesting. I've been here for 5.5 years. And my frame of reference is the East Coast, as well as California, two other places I've lived, where the government spends a lot of time on zoning and planning. And my observations just from the years I've been here is that there seems to be an attempt to act like a zoner, you know, with respect to all of the development that's done right by the road and with the hangar and so on. And there's really been very good planning that appears to be a place where there are public uses. And then they're coming up our street. I've watched the development of density a little bit, but for the most part in our section of street, there's still a certain amount of building to land, and it's been all non-commercial. And so with my framework of participating and watching the zoning be something that all the citizens paid attention to, both in Oakland, California, and also out on the East Coast outside of New York City, I'm scratching my head here. I recognize the city of Kenmore is relatively new, but you have taken on the framework of zoning without it being a lot of explicit details. So my question, to try to get explicit about the question, is this. You've got school zoning, and then you've got residential zoning. And so it feels more like a take or something that is against your zoning principles. Can you address what the city of Kenmore, between the Public Works Department and the people who are working for the city of Kenmore, do with respect to zoning? Because it seems like we already have the school zones and then we have residential. So how does this fit? Is this a whole legal change? Is this something that all of us have to go vote for? How does the zoning work in this case? Because it seems like it's counter to what I've observed Kenmore doing in terms of development.
Okay, so what I can answer a quick question, and then I've also got Debbie, our community development director, that maybe could answer some more detailed questions about the rezoning. But the school is zoned public, semi-public, and that's exactly the same zone that a public works facility would be zoned. So it would be a change in zoning from the residential to public, semi-public. So the long and short of it, it's not a rezoning into like a commercial zone or anything like that. It would be rezoning to exactly the same zone as the school property, which is allowable use for the public works facility.
Is that, sorry for interruption, is that change from residential over to this public use something that the citizens weigh in on and help you decide? Or is that something that you do as a taking? You're like, I want to buy this property, I'm the city, and I go ahead. So I'm just curious about the process of rezoning in general from residential.
Sure. So as I understand it, it's a comp plan amendment. It's a long process. It's not something that, you know, is something that happens overnight. It is something that is brought to the Planning Commission, and the community has opportunities to provide input. Debbie, are you there? Can you
Yes.
maybe do a better job of explaining?
No, I think you've done a really good job of explaining, Jennifer, is that it would need an amendment to the comprehensive plan, and along with a change to the zoning to allow this to be a public, semi-public use for the public workshop. So there is a process to go through. An amendment to the comprehensive plan does require a recommendation from the Planning Commission to the City Council, and then the City Council would take the final action on the comprehensive plan amendment and zoning amendment.
Thank you. So we're at the very beginning of these considerations, it sounds like.
Yes, that process wouldn't begin until after, if the council moves forward with the purchase, then, you know, that would be the next step.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Is it Mike? Mike
Runstrom.
That's it.
There we go. Thank you. Hi, I'm Mike Runstrom. I built the log home that is directly across from this site. Just to show how much I care about this, I actually built the home when I was 28 years old. That was 27 years ago, and raised my family there. If you've driven by there, you look up and behind the trees and you can see a beautiful log home on 2 acres. And obviously I like the trees and the way that the city of Kenmore is for a lot of us. I'm next door neighbors with Milton, and we similarly have the same size lots, and we love the trees and the beauty. You don't need to answer some of these questions. You can do it online or whatnot. I'd love to see the plans. I think there's a 20-year study that was done for what size of building you would be putting on the property, and then how many vehicles would be on the site. I don't know when you can answer those. If it's a quick answer, great. If it's not, no big deal, as long as we can know about that. I know that Lake Forest Park, their facility is something you can drive by and you don't really technically know that it's even there. I do know they planted smaller trees and then they grew up and they made it so it was hidden for the people and the residents around that. I want to talk a little bit about that. The road work that was just done, they took down a large cedar tree in the front yard and it opened up a huge vacancy, and you can see up through there. Not a big deal. It's on city property. That's fine. But one of my concerns is just having a facility like this in a residential area is going to not necessarily be very attractive. So my hopes is to talk about what we can do to make that better. In that, there's only 2 sides of this property that are really affected. The school is on one side and the gravel lot for the school is on the other side. So there's 2 sides that are affected. And so what I'm hopeful to do is have somebody that can make a decision whether you can tell us that you're willing to go ahead and install large trees or larger trees than normal, so that would block the view of the building and the vehicles and the gravel that will be there, so that it's not an eyesore for all the neighbors. I'm hopeful that you can put maybe a 15-foot strip along 202nd Street where these can be planted. Milton, like he said, he's planted trees to block other houses, and likewise, I've done that as well. And I'm hopeful that the city would consider Milton and I together picking out the proper trees that would block the facility, so you wouldn't have to see this from the local houses. It makes sense also to me, and I'm hopeful that the city and the planning department would put the building at west end down in the hole. It's basically the deepest part of it, so it will be lower down, and then make the access for driving up onto the road at the smaller lift, so the cars wouldn't be, trucks coming out wouldn't be coming up a steep driveway. I'd like to just encourage the city to make some of those thoughts in there, putting the building in, making it lower in the area, and putting taller trees to block that from driving from 202nd Street. I would really, really like it if somebody would make some commitments to the people around, that it would be a 15-foot strip with nice tall trees like they did in Lake Forest Park. I don't know if we can get that kind of a commitment, but it would be nice to support this if it was something that we can't see. Of course, I understand we're not going to have odors and smells, but having a building or an eyesore or something like that with lots of trucks is a concern. Lastly, again, this is something that is a desire. I'd really like this. From my front porch, I, of course, enjoy the view out the front porch of our log home. And if I'm looking at a structure and a building and a bunch of trucks and stuff, that would be discouraging. So if somebody from the city could come to a few of us neighbors that are affected by this, and we're able to stand on our porch or look from our porch and see what we would be seeing, if they're willing to say, yes, we'll get proper screening to make sure you're not looking at buildings and trucks and this kind of thing within 3 to 5 years, that would be, that'd be wonderful. So that's most of the things that I'd like to talk about. I'm hopeful that you can maybe answer some, but I don't want to take up a lot of time. You can answer them later if you need to. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Those are great. What I will say real quickly is that we are committed to screening and fitting into the neighborhood. We want to be a good neighbor. We want you to want us there. We, don't want to be located there and have everyone be upset about it. We want to do the best we can to be the best neighbor that we can and to fit in with the neighborhood. We don't want to just come in and put some big ugly concrete building in there and be an eyesore as you drive by. I think that if you see the slide on the screen, I've tried to provide a couple of examples of some of the other facilities that are public works facilities that have I guess more of a neighborhood feel, or more of a non-commercial feel to them. So that would be our goal, is to fit in with the neighborhood. As far as the types of trucks, and I'm happy to provide all this information for everybody, but we are a very small operation. We don't have a ton of big trucks. We're talking Ford F-150s, F-350s. We've got a couple of larger vehicles. Our dump truck is a 10-yard dump truck, which is an F-750. The dump trucks you see out on the construction projects, they're like 30-yard trucks. They're much, much bigger. We have one backhoe loader. We've got a street sweeper, and that's probably one of the biggest pieces of equipment that we do own. So, but I'm happy to provide a list of all of our equipment, and so it gives you a better idea of exactly what type of equipment that we have stored on the site. But there are lots of hands up, so I'm happy to respond to those in some follow-up information.
Thank you so much for responding that way. I really appreciate it. And we do want to work together, but yeah, it obviously, if we're able to get some big screening and not have to put smaller ones and have to wait for them to be big, that would be a big desire. Thank you.
We'll definitely, some of the council are here tonight, and we'll be passing on that information.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see, Patrick O'Brien.
Hi, Pat O'Brien, Kenmore. I think we've looked at the initial attempt of the city to find a spot for this maintenance facility. And the first one, they tried eminent domain. And as we all know, there was a lot of public outcry against that. And I think there are some other properties that are better suited. First of all, I'd say that the city of Sammamish and Woodinville have far bigger budgets, and to use them as the typical example of what we need, and the scale of those buildings are not in any way what the city of Kenmore should have for a maintenance facility. And if it is, then we've got a lot more. The public should be getting a lot more attention than it currently is. I'll just say that. So the site, I agree with the young lady that said the site is ill-suited because it's both a school and residential area, which it is. And it seems to me that if you look at the whole program and you find a better site, then maybe something better could actually go there instead of a maintenance facility. I personally like the idea of the old fire station. And the old fire station is a commercial building. It's built to commercial standards. The fire district already owned it and sold it for 5 cents on the dollar. So I think that school, if you give them a fair amount of money, could resituate itself in the site where you're thinking of the Kenmore maintenance facility, right by the junior high. I think it's natural to have another school in that school area. And I see that as a shaking hand use of that. So the fire station also has an enormous parking lot, and that can be rented actually for a profit to the city by Sound Transit. And there is going to be, I think we'll all agree, there's going to be an expansion of the parking requirement at that bus terminal. So to get back that property that is big and has 3 bays meant to service big trucks is a good idea. The cost would be minimal. You'd have to do some minor conversion of the building, but the building was upgraded by the present owners. And a better site for them, like I said, is over by the junior high. The other site that I thought had some merit was the site that we got when we allowed Brightwater to dig underneath Kenmore. And that's also known as the Twin Ponds area. And that site we wholly own. And nobody would see a facility there. And all they have is a sewage pumping station. You go up this road, it's fenced off. You could have a facility there. We already own the property. And I think some of this problem has to look at what our budget is for this fix. And if we already own the property, then that's miles ahead of the budget. And if a building is already there, so much the better. The other question I have is Keenan Williams seems to be involved in this. And as we know, he works with Inslee Best, unless I'm mistaken, and is involved in eminent domain. And I'd like to know how he was part of this transaction by Kenmore Junior High. And I want him to fully disclose to the public what his involvement is and see if he has any potential conflict of interest. And I believe he did have a conflict of interest, and somebody should tell me if I'm wrong, in the eminent domain process that took place on through Inslee Best in the city on the slough. So let's have full disclosure, Mr. Williams, and just keep in mind that this sort of a building, it would be much better off in an area that's already zoned for it, which the fire station is, and the buildings there, and why that has been poo-pooed and looked the other way, I have no idea. But I definitely think that is the cheapest way to get a great building and a great facility where we'd have parking that we can in turn lease back to Sound Transit. And I thank you for your consideration.
Jennifer, why don't I go ahead and respond? First of all, Mr. O'Brien, I am of counsel with the law firm of Foster Garvey, not Inslee Best. I have been retained by the city of Kenmore to assist them in a property acquisition. There is no conflict. And I also need to correct you with regard to the sale of the old fire station property. I was involved in that when I was representing the fire district and the disposition of that. And it wasn't sold at 50 cents on the dollar. It was appraised.
5 cents. 5 cents.
5 cents on the dollar. No, it was actually appraised and it was sold for greater than the appraised value.
Which was what? How much was that, Keenan? Tell me.
I can't recall. That was a number of years ago, Mr. O'Brien. I am involved in literally hundreds of transactions.
What I heard.
Well, I think you should go and check the records because it is illegal for a municipality to simply give property away. I also want to point out to you that what you're suggesting is that the city acquire through eminent domain an active operating business that generates a great deal of traffic. That is also, that property is also located in the 50-year floodplain. That was why the fire district moved to the location across the way, because they couldn't expand the operation there.
And the difference in altitude is negligible. Negligible. They're on the same street, same corner. So don't tell me they're not going to get flooded in the fire station. The old fire station is. I'm not buying that.
Well, that's what the Army Corps of Engineers says. So I suggest that you take that up with them.
Right. And what about your affiliation with Plywood Supply, the neighboring property, the one that you were involved in the eminent domain with the city of Kenmore on? Did you?
I have no affiliation with Plywood Supply. I again suggest that you check your sources of information, which are incorrect.
I thank you very much, Mr. Williams.
Hey, Sandra Avery.
Yes. I also live on 202nd, and 3 years ago, the property across from me was looked at for this facility. My question, and I guess I would like to make that statement, that I simply feel that this facility is incorrect in its placement in a residential neighborhood, and that there are other properties in Kenmore that would be more suitable. People purchased the property in this neighborhood because it was a neighborhood and it was residential. And so I feel like it affects our property value. It affects the whole feeling of our neighborhood. I would personally rather have homes in that area, and I don't see why they would be tearing down two perfectly good homes to put that facility in. I mean, I think that's a real waste of our money. And I think that I would like to think that the city council is looking out for our welfare in terms of our residential areas and our neighborhoods. And that the placement of this kind of facility should go, where it is right now, to me, is appropriate. And anywhere in that area is appropriate. But putting it in a neighborhood is not appropriate. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, bear with me if I pronounce this wrong. William Kirschke.
Hello. Thanks for giving a brief description of what's proposed. I live on 6750 Northeast 202nd Street, which was near the prior facility, just to the south where you guys were looking. I guess I have two quick comments on it. The rezoning, I'm a little concerned that there might be rezoning creep, and if it is rezoned, there might be additional proposals come forward because of the rezone to add on to that or rezone other properties adjacent. That was one of the arguments that I received from the city on the last proposed development. They said, well, the school's there, it's already zoned there. Not a big deal to rezone this because the neighbors won't be disturbed by this additional rezoning and potential larger traffic volumes at that time they had noted. So that's one concern, that there's going to be creep. I did note that there are restrictions on this. Thanks for identifying the public and semi-public. Utility facilities are outright allowed, parking, recreational facilities, offices, fire and police safety. However, I did notice in the regulations in the Kenmore code that they do allow for uses not listed in the table of what's outright permitted and conditional use permitted if you go through a site plan process. Now, I'm not familiar with the Kenmore site plan process, but it looks like although there are restrictions on what can be established underneath this zoning, it said classified land use is not listed or prohibited in table A, which identifies outright uses, may be allowed through completion of site plan review process pursuant to Kenmore Code 1827-060. So that's one concern I have, is with the rezone. The other is just additional safety hazards with larger construction equipment. We've had 2 vehicles already drive in through our yard within a month. Right before COVID, traffic is terrible on this street. The speed limit's too high. And I guess if this was going to go through as a rezone, I'd be looking at a mitigation measure in the comp plan of reducing the speed limit on 202nd Street to 25 miles an hour. I heard it may be reduced down to 30. The road improvements that were already done have only increased the speed of vehicles because people feel more liberated to speed along the road. Also noted early this spring, there was a fatality on a weekend. It was either early May or early June. 300 feet down the street. It was really early in the morning on a weekend. I talked to the coroner who showed up. He wouldn't tell me what happened, but it appeared to me it was maybe a hit and run fatality, and I couldn't find it in any of the papers, but I do know there's significant safety hazards along this road. And I feel that rezone and potential future rezones under this could significantly impact safety along the road. So those are my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Jeff Stockamp.
Yeah. Hi. Just a quick question. So if this public workshop is supposed to service all of the city of Kenmore, how important is it that it be centrally located within the city? This location seems to be kind of on the northern edge of the city. Wouldn't something, say, along 522 be more suitable to service all of Kenmore?
I think that that's a good question, but being that the city is about 6 square miles, you can get from, one end to the other fairly quickly. I mean, right now with the construction,
well, not right now. Yeah.
With the Ramish Bridge, makes it a little more difficult, but I don't think that that's going to be a problem, and I don't think it will affect the way we can serve the community. Elizabeth?
Hi, Elizabeth Berg, and my husband Andrew here. We live at 6730 Northeast 202nd. First, I would just like to reiterate what Bill Kershke said. We live next to Bill, and we've also had 2 cars drive into our into our yard. 2 separate cars than the ones that drove into Bill's. We, I don't know, sent some emails to the city, but nothing has ever been effectively done to curb that. So I would just like to, again, just emphasize, because we live right at that curve where 68th turns into 202nd, and people are already driving too fast. As Bill said, they crash into our yards, and with more traffic, that's just going to increase unless something is done immediately to stop that. And then second, Jennifer, I would like some clarification. Is there also going to be a decant facility at this public works site?
So for street sweeping debris, decant facility, yes, we have a decant facility, makeshift decant facility currently at Rhododendron Park. And so for similar to that, it would be for our street sweepings debris to decant, which basically means just, all of the gunk that we sweep up off of the street drains out before we go to dispose of it.
Mm-hmm. So what does that mean in terms of if you're going to relocate it then from Rhododendron to this, wherever this future site is? Is that the proposal?
Yes, I mean, we don't have any plans yet, but the decant facility, yes. But not for sewer. We're not talking about that kind of waste. We're talking about, and we're not talking about surface water facility waste. We're talking about street sweeping debris. So a lot of leaves, needles, sand, the stuff you see on the street, we sweep up. A lot of water comes with it. So we drain out the water and then dispose of the solids.
Okay, so that's in addition to your 5 pickup trucks that you were talking about.
A decant facility is simply a covered storage area.
Oh, but I mean, in terms of traffic wise.
As far as like bringing our street sweeper back into the shop.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, that's all. I just needed that clarification because that wasn't something I had heard discussed, and just wanted to make sure that was, I guess, actual truth or factual, but okay. And then my third comment is just that because there was a failed attempt to place this in a commercial site doesn't mean that's still not the right thing to do. I feel that the explanations we've heard are just like, well, oh, well, this didn't work last time when we tried to put it in a commercial site. So now we're going to open it up to everything. That doesn't mean it's still not the right thing to do to put this in a commercial/industrial area instead of a residential area. So I would just, again, encourage the city to really just focus back on that. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. And we only have a few minutes left, and so I would like to get everyone a chance to speak. I'm going to move on to Trudy.
Good evening. I'm Trudy Rolla. I live at 20010 68th Avenue Northeast, one of the new houses. However, I've lived in this neighborhood since 1988. And full disclosure, I'm a commissioner at the North Shore Utility District. However, I'm not here for them. I'm here as a resident of the neighborhood. I just have a couple of points that I don't think anybody else has addressed. As far as the location at the far north end of the city, again, I thought, well, of course, everybody agrees it should be more centrally located. And having it there means more travel miles, which means more travel emissions. And I know the city is trying to be green and trying to cut down emissions and do its bit for greenhouse gases, but this seems to be in contradiction with that goal. Secondly, regarding an environmental impact statement, it's my understanding because you have to change the zoning, that will trigger an environmental impact statement and it would not be conditionally exempt. Do you know if that's the case?
Debbie, are you still on?
Which I think is a question, but the environmental impact statement would cover a lot of these things, including comparison to alternatives, alternative locations, and so on.
I can just say that an environmental impact statement is not a requirement when there is a comprehensive plan amendment or a zoning change. So it's not a requirement. It would be the process for environmental review would be determined when we get to that point.
Okay. And I've worked in government my whole career. I'm retired, but I'm still at the utility district. And it's my opinion that whenever government makes a decision out of desperation for expediency's sake, it's not a good decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Dale and Chris Lynn.
Yes, this is Dale Lynn. We're at 6415. We're directly across from the proposed facility. My question is, I understand how Lake Forest pulled the rug underneath us a couple years ago and we came up with a 20-year plan. My question is, since that 2 years when we made that plan, have we revisited the criteria based on the data that we've had? Because it looks like the Public Works has done their job with the size of facilities now. And the question is, do we have to expand that far? So have we revisited the criteria? Because if you move the criteria from 1.5 minimum down to 1.2, that would give you a lot more options. Okay, and also, and do we even need a 1.2 even size based on, we're landlocked, we're only 6 miles square. We can't add any significant amount of roads in the next 40 years because there's nowhere to put that. So first question I'd like to know is, have we revisited the criteria with the last 2 years of data? Because the operations have been great. I know tough, but great under the circumstances.
So real quick, we have not revisited the planning, criteria for the shop site. But I guess what people don't think of is all of the improvements that we make. Even though we're not adding roads, we're adding additional assets. So, all these new streets sidewalks we're adding, park improvements, we're doing all these landscape islands and all that. So even though we're not building out anymore, really, we still are making improvements. And once you make those improvements, we have to take care of them forever. And so that's how assets add up. But I want to give everyone a chance, and I will, like I said, I'll try to follow up on all of these questions afterwards.
Jennifer,
Grant?
I'm so sorry to interject. This is Anastasia, the city clerk. Unfortunately, we have a hard stop at 7 o'clock. We don't want to compete with people being able to give public comment or testimony at the council meeting. So I will be stopping the recording in about 2 minutes. So if possible, maybe we can take the rest of the comments offline, or Jennifer, you would know what to do.
Yeah, let me put back the, I'm going to put my contact information in the chat. And you can email me and I will get back to you. We also will be discussing the property, the update on all of the work that we've done in the property assessments on July 26th during a council meeting. So we'll be talking about it again then. Let's see where, I'm not seeing the chat.
I don't believe we have the chat function enabled here.
If we go onto our website, City of Kenmore, there is a Public Works Facilities page, and you can find my contact number or information there. Let's see.
I think it was on the show page when you were sharing your screen.
Yeah, it was Anastasia was showing. I'm not sure why it disappeared. But I will add that to the website, and my email address, so you have it, is Jennifer Gordon. Oh, there it is. jgordon@kenmorewa.gov. And there's the project page also on that sheet. I really appreciate everybody's participation, and want to let you all know that it's very important for me to hear all of the comments and concerns and take them into consideration. I really thank you for your participation tonight.